All right, Jeremy Hazel here for the Quarantine Experiment. This is an excerpt from our course, The Quarantine Experiment, totally free at the link below. So if you like what you see and you want more daily updates from the Quarantine Experiment, go ahead and subscribe. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the tutorial. All right, folks, welcome to the Quarantine Experiment. Today I thought maybe we'd put ripples inside of a lake here in Affinity Photo. Now, I'm a fan of Affinity Photo, but I'll tell you, this is one thing it does not do as well as, say, Photoshop. So there's a couple different ways home. You can use displacement maps, you can use bump maps, you can do a lot of other stuff. I'm going to show you an easy, modifiable way to do this. And when I say easy, it's probably going to be more mouse clicks than it has to be. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, I've got this image here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come down. I'm going to create a new pixel layer. I'm going to grab my flood fill tool, and I'm going to fill it with white. Boom. Now we're going to come over to filters, and I'm going to add some noise, and I'm going to add in some purlin noise. So there's my octaves, my zoom, and my persistence, and I'm going to apply. So I've got some noise here, right? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to come down to filters, distort, and I'm going to twirl. Now I'm going to crank this bad boy up. Notice these are my settings. You can go as high as like 2000 if you wanted to. All right, bring it in there. I don't like the way this cuts off. So what I tend to do is I tend to go to about the area where I have good, how do I put this? Good edges around. You see how that's still even cutting off? I'd go to 1200. And now I have some pretty good edges. I don't want a sharp edge there. All right. So we now apply that. So we've applied the purlin noise to break up the monotony. We've applied the twirl to get the ripple. Now we're actually going to add a ripple filter. So we come over here to ripple. And now notice down here in the lower left-hand corner, drag to set the ripple center, shift drag to set intensity. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crank up the intensity here. And I want a relatively low intensity. But the secret here is to adjust the center. You see how I adjust the center? My twirl starts to move. So I'm going to go until I get a pretty good center. You see how I'm even outside of the canvas? That's going to be pretty good for me. The further you go out, the weirder it gets. But notice what happens if I'm in the center. Nothing. So I want to shift from center, and this is going to allow us to break up our pattern. And then I just find a ripple that I like that's quasi-realistic. I think that I'm pretty good right about there. And now let's hit apply. All right, now, if you're staying with me, this is going to be my ripple layer. Okay, fair enough. Now we're going to distort. We're going to come down to the perspective tool. And once I've got my image established, I'm going to come down and I'm going to distort this plane. This is what is going to make my ripple quasi-believable. And what I want to do, I want to match the image that I have on my item. So I think that I'm pretty close to right about here in my picture. If I'm going to put this ripple in this area, this will probably do. Okay. Now, once you get it to where you kind of want it, make sure you hit apply. And now the trick is going to be positioning it where you want it. And now we're going to change the blend mode to overlay. And you can see it begin to show through there. Now it's not great, right? It's right here. Here's what makes this modifiable. Come into levels, attach the level to the ripple. And now, depending on what works for you, you can crank up the blacks. You can crank up the white until you get the look you're going for. Now, once I find a ripple that I kind of like, the last portion of this here is to mask this thing out. Now, if it gets a little bit crazy, let me show you something that you could do. you could limit the output of the black area and you could limit the output of the white area. So let's say I wanted to limit the output of the black while increasing the white. Notice now my ripple shows up a little bit better. Okay. Now, once you get the ripple where you want it, the last step, you're going to come in and you're going to add a mask adjustment. You're going to grab a soft brush with the color of black, and making sure you're on the mask layer, you're going to take out anywhere that you don't want that ripple. So let's say I don't want the ripple over here by the grass. I take that out. All right. Now, you can play with blend modes. I'm not telling you that you can't play with blend ranges and that certain blend modes might work better for certain applications. You see there's a nice one there, and I could mask out this area here. Oops, let's not draw that in. Let's go ahead and mask that away, huh? Don't want to make it worse than it actually is. And the reason I like doing it this way is I'm able to adjust to make it match. Now, if I wanted to add a ripple, say, later over here, you see how this is a little bit different here? What I'm going to want to do now, I might want to change this up a little bit. I may want to make this ripple a little bit bigger. And I might want to do something a little bit different in terms of the perspective. And because this is totally customizable, if I wanted to bring back certain elements, I could, with my brush selected, bring back certain elements of the ripple if I wanted. And if it would look better to match back there, I could even come into the levels adjustment and I could adjust the foreground and the background the way that I want it so that I get the right mix in terms of my ripple. So this is probably as close as Affinity Photo gets to this. It's not going to be perfect. If I was to do this over, what I might do at this point, I would probably in my mask layer add in some form of a gradient mask so that it wasn't as pronounced. And I would probably then even drop down the opacity just ever so slightly on this layer to make it match. All right, that's a little bit about how to add a ripple inside of Affinity Photo. Hope you learned a little bit about how to use Perlin noise, how you can use the twirl, how you use the ripple, how you distort, and how this thing now can be adjusted anywhere and replicated anywhere that you want it inside of Affinity Photo. All right, folks, let's go ahead and we'll see you in the next day of the quarantine experiment. Have a good one.